Jodi, welcome to the Home Services Growth Summit show. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I am well. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you. I hope you're well too.
Long time no talk to.
I know.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Jodi. Tell us who you are and what you do and kind of the journey of life.
Who is Jodi? So, Jodi Daniels. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm the CEO of Red Clover Advisors, and we are a data privacy consulting company. We're helping companies figure out what data is okay, not okay to collect, use, store, share, what marketing is okay to do, those privacy notices, those cookie banners people see on websites all the time. And when I'm not working, I'm married to my husband, Justin. We have a book we co-wrote together, a podcast that we record together, and we're parents to two people and a furry creature.
Well, I want to dive into this topic about data and privacy because I don't know that a lot of home services companies, unless they're much bigger, often think about this. But why should any business, even a home service business, care about data and privacy? I think a lot of times we think about it from a TCPA lead generation and compliance standpoint, but there's just as many regulations around data. And I want to kind of lean into a little bit the effect that collecting that data has on the relationship, especially from a trust standpoint, with consumers out there, because a lot of times it doesn't matter if you're Apple or Microsoft, or if you're a bathroom modeler or a window or roof, type company. Customers expect you to respect their data and privacy.
Absolutely. So let's take, a company, and maybe for most of these, they likely have to come out to your house and look at something and figure out what it is, right? Almost every home project is always a little bit extra special and unique. Well, now they have my home address. That's a really personal data point, right? Not just my name and my email and my phone, which by themselves, just on their own, count as personal information these days. You
Can
might
you
also
go ahead
have
and
my
share
home address.
your address now on the show? We'll
You
just
know what?
put it in the show notes.
When I'm asked, I always say I live at One Mouse Lane, and
There you go.
I always use Disney in my in my stories. So, in all seriousness, though, you're going to have a very personal piece of information. You're trusting someone to also come into your home. So, the very first piece is, who are you as a company? And I'm hoping that you're a trustworthy person to solve my home problem, and a trustworthy person that I'm allowing into my home. And you're going to have my home address. What are you going to do with it? Now, if you only had name or email or phone or that trifecta, that's still a lot of information. Many companies think of privacy as security, meaning, oh, I only have to worry about it from a data breach perspective. And people will say all the time, well, I don't have any health information and I don't collect credit card. And I say, well, congratulations. You just have less to worry about. If you have name, email, and phone, there's still enough there that you have to deal with. Let's take a company. That email list happens to be sent out by accident. Someone gets to it. There is a data breach. Now someone has an email. They can use it for phishing purposes. You might not have to qualify under fancy data breach rules, but now someone else has that email. The other really important piece, though, is how is data used? I gave you my name, my email, my phone. I'm looking for home services. Did you do something else with it? Did you share it to someone else? I didn't expect that. I just wanted some help in my home. And those are the kinds of questions that consumers are asking. And the person who is most trustworthy on the project and the data will ultimately win, the customer.
So as some of our listeners in business and in the home service space, right, you're going to have all different size businesses. As a business, if I'm looking at privacy, does that matter when I'm trying to protect my business or who I'm working with?
From a customer standpoint, the answer is no. Customers don't really walk around and say, oh, you're small. That's okay. You can do anything you'd like. I mean, how many times have you ever walked into a smaller doctor's office? Maybe it's even just a solo person and said, you know what? You don't have to comply with HIPAA. It's okay. You can just show my chart to everyone. I'm good with that. You would never expect that. You would expect the same, just as if you went to a major hospital. Now, some might say, well, that's just health data. This is just like we just talked about, name, email, phone, maybe my home address. But again, for all the reasons we've just discussed, that is still really important information. From a law perspective, there are some thresholds. And so some of the growing state laws, and while we're recording this, there are actually 14 state privacy laws that are in effect. And those do have some thresholds. Some of the smaller companies listening might not have to technically comply with some of those. But our friends at the Federal Trade Commission, which almost everyone here has to deal with, and if you have a website, it would say you have to have a privacy notice. If you're using some type of social media pixel or really large search engine pixel on your website, you also have to make sure that you're telling me what kind of data you're collecting and letting me opt out. You agreed to those terms when you signed on the dotted line. Some were buried in those terms when you clicked OK. For those reasons, you do have to care about privacy.
What's an easy place for a lot of the businesses to really kind of get started with conducting an audit? We know they could have a cookie policy, for example, on their website, and most sites do, thank goodness now. But if you were going to leave this podcast with anything, obviously it would make people want to go see you speak at the Home Services Growth Summit show, February at HomeServicesGrowthSummit.com. How's that for a plug? But honestly, really, where do people need to start, at least with the audit of starting to consider data and privacy in their business?
I'm going to give a two-part answer. And the very first one is don't go to your competitor and steal theirs, because what they're doing is not what you're necessarily doing. Every site is different. So now to address your own site, the very first place is literally to understand what you're actually collecting. And what many companies will do is they'll start by the system. I like to start by the process. Somehow those two are going to get tied together. For example, you get leads from where? Do they go into an email service provider? Do you have some type of customer relationship management tool? How do you call these people? How do you keep track with them? Do you send surveys? How can I make an appointment? Do you have a job application part? Let's not forget about the employee side. So wherever reviews, right? Think about all the different places that you might collect data. It can be as simple as a spreadsheet. We have a really fancy spreadsheet for free in our site, but you can just whip out a piece of paper and write down, here's all the systems that you have. Then say what kind of data you have. Oh, and this one I have name and email. This one I have name, email, and address, and so on and so forth. And then you want to tie what you do with the information. It's not enough to only have a list of systems and exactly what you're collecting and doing with it. We want to understand the why. I collect this email so I can send them these 5, 20, I don't know how many emails you all are sending. That's a really good question. This exercise might make you realize, am I doing the right thing? Does this make sense for my customer? So to summarize, you want to make a list, some type of data list of all the systems, all the data in the systems, and the how and why you're using that data.
And who has access to it. As you're talking about this, there's a couple of companies that I've dealt with that were small in the 5 to 10 million range, and then plenty that were in the $500 million and up range. And I'm shocked at how often they lean into their agency to do everything for them, and they give them not complete access, but access to a lot of the data. And you rely on them to be good actors, but if there's a breach or somehow there's some sort of lawsuit, the brand's on the hook. The agency is just going to lose a contract. And so it's also just, to me, a reminder that the brand needs to take more ownership of the data, more ownership of who has access to the data as well, because I know so many people they lean on their agencies as far as they can. And that's great and all, but to the point where it can also be detrimental. So
you bring up a great point. I'd love to add to it. One of the pieces would be a lot of times in those agencies, people are changing. And
absolutely.
If you granted access to person one and then, she's gone, go add, him over here, and you add that second person, you have to go and delete the first person. It's really important to be able to do that. The other important piece is many times you're vetting your employees. Who are you? How can I trust you with this company data? Or you're training them, or you're holding them to certain standards. You need to do the same with your vendors. And what are the security measures that you have in place to access to that data? And how does the vendor handle those security measures as well? Do they grant everyone in the agency access to it? Do they share the password around with all 2,100 people? Do they just put it on a Post-it note? I mean, there's a variety of different questions, because you're absolutely right. If there's an issue, the brand is on the hook.
This is some great information for business owners, big or small, right along the way. And earlier you mentioned you have a book. Now, I'm sure everybody's heard the Capital One phrase, banking reimagined, but I love data reimagined. Tell us a little bit about the book, because I'm really curious too. You said you wrote that with your husband, right? My wife's my business partner in some of my ventures. Tell us a little bit about your book and why people should maybe read it, a couple things they might take from it.
So it's called Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Bite at a Time. And it is written for the business professional. It is not a super boring technical book. It is really written for the business person to understand privacy and security and how it affects all different parts of a business and why it matters. So many people think about privacy and security as a compliance activity. There's a law, I should pay attention to it. The Federal Trade Commission says I have to have a privacy policy. I'll just go get one of those. I'll put it on my site and I'm done. And at the same time, businesses are trying to collect as much data as possible so that we can sell more stuff. Our premise is you should do all of that with a privacy and security notion in mind. You should put the customer first. You should think of privacy and security just like you think about how much will something cost. Is this a legal activity? Do I need a contract? Who are the people? What tech do I need? Everyone always asks all those questions. We want you to ask and understand why the privacy piece is so important. The more that customers trust you with their data, the more data they will give you. So instead of just looking, can I gather as much data as possible, use it however I want to, we want you to reimagine which data you should collect, reimagine how that relationship can be with your customer, and understand that just like they're trying to trust how you will solve their home problem, that they also are trusting you when they give you their data. And so that is the entire premise behind the book. There's tons of stories throughout it. Like I said, it is not a boring technical book. We've had people say that they've read it over the weekend and really liked it.
Jodi, if a business wants to reach out to you, where can they find out more about your consultancy and, what your team offers?
The best place is redcloveradvisors.com. And then I'm really active on LinkedIn. I invite everyone listening to come find me there. I'd love to connect.
Awesome. Jodi, thank you so much for being with us today on the Home Services Growth Summit show.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.